sa ating mga komunidad.
Nagpapasalamat po si Senator Pangilinan. Nakapagtapos ako ng 2 nurse, isang seaman, at isang kumukuha ng medical technology ngayon.
Yung salipsakan ni Sir Chico, parang nabuhayan na naman kami ng dignidad, kasi nga marami naman pagsubok na nalalampasan, pero kung may nag-aalala talaga, may tumutulong, siyempre lumalakas din ang loob.
Ano ang pangarap ko sa agrikultura sa Pilipinas? Na lahat nirerespeto, kinikilala ang sakripisyo ng mga magsasaka at mangingisda. Yun ang aking pangarap.
Welcome to meet the Vice Presidentiables, economic reforms in the new frontier. Before we start, join us in prayer and the singing of the Philippine National Anthem. Heavenly Father, you are our Creator, our light, our wisdom and strength. May we ask for your guiding hand to lead us through this forum today and every day as we accomplish our work and various tasks. We pray for joy, enthusiasm, and fulfillment in our work. May we conduct ourselves and our business dealings in an environment of fairness, respect, and compassion. May we ask you to enter the hearts and minds of our leaders and countrymen. Give them strength, wisdom, so that they may lead us through these difficult times with honesty, integrity, humility, and selflessness. Finally, we pray that you extend your healing hand over us, our families, and our nation, and help us overcome this health crisis that has claimed so many lives, including the lives of many of our friends, family members, and colleagues. Please heal those who are sick and guide the hands and minds of our doctors and nurses as they care for them. All these we humbly pray. Amen. Let us now welcome our host for today. She is the chairperson of Phoenix National Affairs Committee, MAP past president, and trustee and treasurer at Makati Business Club, Ms. Rizalina Mantaring.
Good afternoon once again to Phoenix and FFCCC II members, guests from partner organizations, JRI, IHAP, MAP, MBC, PCCI, SharePhil, and PhilWen, our friends in media, and everyone listening on live stream and TV. This is the fourth forum with the 2022 presidential and vice presidential candidates that we've held. For this series, we in the Financial Executives Institute of the Philippines, or FINEX, and the Federation of Filipino-Chinese Chambers of Commerce and Industry Incorporated, or FFCCCII, are putting the focus on economic reforms issues. By doing so, we hope to encourage the whole nation to focus the national debates and discussions on the much-needed economic reforms for the Philippines. Both groups are non-political and non-partisan. Thus, our objectives in organizing this forum are to emphasize the importance of these reforms in creating a better future for the Philippines. These include job creation, inclusive and sustainable economic growth, support for micro, small, and medium-scale enterprises, strengthening our global competitiveness from industries, services, to agriculture, boosting foreign direct investments and tourism, increasing trade and exports, modernizing infrastructure, lessening red tape and inefficiencies, and other economic issues. A long list, but that just shows you how much has to be done. We would, of course, like to thank our sponsors, Grab Philippines, United Auctioneers, and the W Group. Special thanks to our official broadcaster, Signal TV, and our official media partner, the Manila Times. Today, we will hear from one of the vice presidential candidates as he shares his economic plans and programs for the country, if he is given a chance to serve as the 17th Vice President of the Republic of the Philippines. At this point, may I call on Mr. Michael Arcatomi Guarin, Phoenix President and Partner, Deal Advisory of KPMG, RG Manabat and Company, for his welcome remarks.
Thank you, Riza. Again, good afternoon. So, good afternoon, Senator Kiko Pangilinan, and welcome to our forum. It is an honor to have you with us today. Again, I would like to welcome and recognize the organization heads and representatives from our co-presenters, already mentioned earlier by our MC, as well as the co-sponsors. Again, thank you very much for your continued support. So on behalf of the FINEX directors, officers, and members, I would like to welcome all of you to the second installment of our Meet the Vice Presidentiables, Economic Reforms in the New Frontier. And consistent with what Riza mentioned earlier, this is our fourth session overall. So again, we really appreciate the continued support from all our attendees, viewers, and members. This is part of our series of really getting to know the economic platforms, planned programs, and initiatives of the candidates. So this afternoon, let me share another quote, this time around from JFK, wherein he said, "The ignorance of one voter in a democracy impairs the security of all." I truly believe again on this statement and that we need to have a concerted effort of not just preparing ourselves, but also the people around us. The May 2022 elections is consequential and will determine the course of our country's future, especially as we navigate through the effects of the pandemic and lockdowns in the way we live and operate our businesses. That is why it is our continued responsibility as citizens to be adequately informed about the platforms of our candidates so that we will have a sound and factual basis for making our choice come election day. Voter education is paramount, and to be able to participate meaningfully in electing the future leaders of our nation. In the last forum, I shared GDP numbers as of third quarter of 2021. Since then, we now have received fourth quarter and full year 2021 numbers. Our 2021 full year GDP clocked at around 5.6%. Definitely an improvement from 2020's negative 9.6% decline. It is our earnest hope that this economic recovery and revival continue as we confront new variants and maybe changing mobility restrictions. To do this, the government and us, the business community, must work hand in hand to produce and come up with practical and feasible policies and solutions. Our elected leaders are the ones that set the overall direction, economic policy decisions, and exercise the political will to execute with discipline the measures that need to be done to ensure economic growth. However, we know that as members of the business community, we play an active part in providing on-the-ground feedback and insights that the government should take into consideration. So that is why we must hear from the candidates their economic positions and proposed programs and judge for ourselves if theirs is the best set of policies that would benefit the country as well as the entire community in general. So before I end my brief opening remarks, I would like to thank Liaison Director from Phoenix, Ned Goseco, Chairperson, Nenette De Jesus, and Tony Boy Ongsiaco for helping spearhead this particular session. Thanks, of course, goes to Blanca Mercado and, of course, immediate past President Francis Lim for the continued support. Thank you, Attorney Mike Toledo, for agreeing to moderate our event. And lastly, thank you to our Brain Trust. Thank you, Governor Saiti Tanco, our MC, Riza Mantaring, and Mr. Romy Bernardo for helping draft some of the questions that will be asked. But definitely, for all of you listening right now, feel free to post your questions for Attorney Mike's consideration. Again, I am excited to hear from Senator Kiko, and I look forward to an engaging session. Good afternoon, and mabuhay ang Phoenix.
Thank you, President Mike. May I now introduce our moderator for today's session. Attorney Mike Toledo is the Director for Government and Public Affairs of the Metro Pacific Investments Corporation, MPIC. He is also the head of the MVP Group Media Bureau. Attorney Toledo writes a regular column in the Philippine Star, and he is a host of One News Channel's Titans on Signal TV. Mike served as press secretary and presidential spokesperson during the administration of former President Joseph Ejercito Estrada. Mike was also the campaign spokesman and media bureau director of former Defense Secretary Gilbert Teodoro, who ran for president in 2010. He obtained his Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Laws degree from the University of the Philippines, and he earned his Master of Laws in Public International Law at the prestigious London School of Economics and Political Science through a scholarship grant from the British government. He was accepted at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University in 1993. So to our super moderator, Attorney Mike, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much again, Risa, for that very generous and kind introduction. And of course, it's always good to see you even virtually, but I do miss our MAP Management Association events wherein we would always be together in the table. But thank you so much again for the kind introduction. And of course, I would like to thank Phoenix, its officers, as well as its board directors for giving me again this opportunity to moderate this Meet the Vice Presidentiable series. I moderated the first Presidentiable series with Senator Ping Lacson. And then about 2 weeks ago, of course, we had Vice President Leni Robredo as well. And today, of course, we will be having, in a few short moments, no less than Senator Kiko Pangilinan. So allow me now, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce our featured Vice Presidential candidate for today. Mga kababayan, ang pinili ni Leni Robredo na makatuwang sa pagmamaneho sa ating bansa at gobyerno ay tunay na maasahan at hindi kaiiwanan. Ang ating magiting na organic farmer sa Alfonso, Cavite, sa loob ng 30 years sa gobyerno, tahimik at maayos na naglilingkod sa inyo ng buong katapatan at sipag. Kaya kahit 30 years na siya sa gobyerno, wala pong dungis ang kanyang serbisyo. Hindi nasangkot sa anumang kalokohan o katiwalian. Ang pinili po ni VP Leni ay simple, disente, masipag, maaasahan sa paglilingkod. Ang pinili po ni VP Lenny para maging vice ay hindi lamang matalino, matapang at matapat, siya rin po ay mahusay na padre de pamilya at beshi ng kanyang mga anak. At marami ang nagsasabi na ang taong ito ay taglay na agimat, anting-anting. Siguro hingi ako ng konting anting-anting sa kanya mamaya. Dahil si Kiko Pangilinan, bukod sa disente, maginoo, masipag, matalino, ang kanyang agimat ay ang kanyang bertud. Ay ang pagka-maginoo at simpatiko na kanyang mapag-ibig at magmahal na pinaka-maningning na bituin na si megastar Sharon Cuneta. Simple, simpatiko, disente, maginoo. Ang kandidato ng Liberal Party para sa Vice Presidente, ladies and gentlemen, Senator Kiko Pangilinan. Welcome, Mr. Senator, and thank you so much, despite your busy schedule, for being with us this afternoon.
Oh, thank you, Mike, and good to see you again. And to everyone, magandang hapon. Good afternoon to all the officers and members of the Phoenix and the Federation of Filipino-Chinese Chambers of Commerce and Industry. Allow me to greet you a happy Chinese New Tiger Year, Kung Hei Fat Choi. It is always an honor to be with the pillars of Philippine business, whom we in government consider as the most valuable and reliable partner in nation building. You in the private sector contribute a whopping 80% of our country's annual GDP. And to you, the largest driver of GDP growth, we in government, we must be strong allies if we are to move our nation away from the worst economic crisis in over 70 years. Those with the most to contribute must be inspired and persuaded to do so in an environment that fosters cooperation and partnership. The role of government is to create the atmosphere conducive to economic growth, to be a catalyst for reforms, and to inspire. Government must inspire the private sector to dig deep into its collective pockets in order to help fuel economic growth for all. Government can only be truly inspiring if it can be trusted upon to exercise its powers judiciously and responsibly, able to provide clarity and certainty in the direction it intends to bring the nation, away from the current treacherous waters of COVID, joblessness, and hunger, toward the calmer, safer waters of more job opportunities, increased incomes, the easing of hunger, bringing down of inflationary food prices, respect for the rule of law, and yes, booming economic growth. Good governance will definitely make this happen. It is in this context that Vice President Lenny and myself, the team Robredo Pangilinan, laid down in the last 2 months key plans to address the current situation we find ourselves in. Among these key plans, as mentioned in the previous dialogue with Vice President Lenny, would be the Kalayaan sa COVID plan, how we intend to get out of the COVID vicious cycle of surge and plateau, what we must do in terms of funding frontliners, how do we address hunger, how do we ensure granular rather than the total lockdowns, among other things, testing, tracing, isolation, and of course, vaccination. And the other plan is the Hanap Buhay Para sa Lahat Jobs Plan. A main and key challenge is facing us today, the loss of jobs, and of course, the economic crisis we face. Kaya mahalaga, paano natin gagawa ng paraan para maging masigla muli ang ating ekonomiya para magkaroon ng trabaho at pagkakakitaan ang ating mga kababayan. Our plans, however, are not merely plans that are churned out every election season, but are plans backed by our combined record of service in both national and local governance spanning at least 40 years. More importantly, it is a track record of service of interventions and reforms undertaken by Vice President Lenny as Vice President and this representation when we were and continue to be Senator, untainted by corruption. Vice President Lenny and I rarely, if at all, call attention to ourselves because we feel the discomfort of blowing our own horns. But given the massive, well-funded disinformation that we are subjected to daily, we need to speak the truth to counter the lies, and we need others to help us do this. Early January this year, Nomura Global Research, a leading investment institution and market research group in Asia, released the study on the coming elections in the Philippines and said that Vice President Lenny is the candidate who is more, quote-unquote, market-friendly and qualified to oversee the post-pandemic recovery of the country compared to the leading candidate. The report, which was written by the ASEAN economic experts, cited the experience of Vice President Lenny at the national level as key in articulating a strategy to get ourselves out of this pandemic mess. Lenny has worked with many of you, as she said in her message when she appeared before you. Her Angat Buhay program that has helped hundreds of thousands of our kababayans nationwide, these could not have been achieved without the support of many in the business sector who partnered with her in achieving the program's goals. And here lies the key of our partnership with Vice President Lenny. Along similar lines, I too have worked side by side with many of you, recognizing in full the need to inspire private sector involvement in nation building. In my first term as senator, a number of you here today may still recall, our office had solid partnerships with the Filipino-Chinese Chamber of Commerce and Industry, wherein we helped build over 200 classrooms at half the cost of the DPWH classrooms. And that was with the Filipino-Chinese Chamber. I believe that with private sector partnership, there is more transparency, there is more accountability, and yes, we are able to initiate key reforms. Those of you who are active with the PCCI will recall our partnership together with the DTI to support micro, small, medium enterprises through the program Propel, the Promoting of Regional Opportunities for Enterprise and Livelihood Program. Tinutulungan natin yung maliliit nating mga kababayan na ang pinakamalaking nagbibigay ng hanap buhay sa marami nating mga kababayan. MSMEs continue to be the largest employers in the country combined. Our office also partnered with Gawad Kalinga and Couples for Christ to build GK homes throughout the country. Our office allocated the largest amounts for Gawad Kalinga homes, again recognizing that partnering with the private sector is a key component of transforming our communities. And in our agriculture advocacies and supporting farmer and fisher folk communities in various parts of the country, Nestle and the Jollibee Foundation have been our partners of the office beginning some 10 years ago. We have been partnering with Jollibee and the Nestle for our coffee farmers and our vegetable farmers. The team Robredo Pangilinan, therefore, does not merely talk the talk. Our track record will show that between Vice President Lenny and myself, as I mentioned earlier, is a total of no less than 40 years of experience, both in the executive and legislative branches of government. And that, apart from talking the talk, we have walked the walk as well. An expert in psychology has said that absent any indication to the contrary, past behavior is the best indicator of future behavior. Thus, we stand behind our record of service. As Vice President, before I end, what would I bring to the table in terms of governance for the next 6 years? We must confront and take the bull by its horns, so to speak, in the matter of food security. I was Food Security Secretary during the time of President Aquino. I had the opportunity to address the challenges of the agriculture sector also as chairman of the Senate Committee on Agriculture from 2010 to 2013, and then again from 2016 to 2017. 1 out of every 4 Filipinos experienced hunger last year because of the inability to access sufficient food. Our farmers earn about 6,000 pesos a month on average, less than what the NEDA has determined to be sufficient to meet the daily needs of a family. Our children are experiencing malnutrition in numbers that are completely unacceptable. According to the UNICEF, 95 children in the Philippines die every day due to malnutrition, while 1/3 of our children throughout the country are stunted in varying degrees due to poor nutrition. These are glaring and unacceptable indicators of our level of food insecurity. I believe that a fundamental and most critical challenge for our nation, and for any nation for that matter, is food security, combating poverty and hunger. Poverty and hunger have been exacerbated by the COVID pandemic. We must, in the next 6 years or so, put food security front and center in the national agenda. In China, for example, when the Chinese Communist Party meets every 2 years to map out its plans and programs, the first item on the agenda is food security. I asked the Chinese minister, why is this so? And he told me, if we do not feed 1.3 billion of our people, we will be many Chinas. Food security is national security. In Thailand, on the other hand, the importance of agriculture was articulated by the late King Bhumibol, who declared that the backbone of the nation is the farmer, suggesting, therefore, that if the farmer is weak, the backbone will be weak, the nation cannot stand. I myself believe that unless society, led by government as catalyst, places the plight of our farmers and fisherfolk front and center in our national agenda, we can never achieve sustainable and rapid economic growth. We cannot reach developed nation status unless we attend to poverty. And poverty is largely a rural phenomenon where the main source of income is agriculture and fishing. Half the population of the country are still in rural areas. This is the reality we have to contend with. To this end, the Robredo Pangilinan administration will endeavor to, number 1, double the agriculture and fisheries budget, retooling the bureaucracy to ensure that the utilization of these funds is pegged on the indicator of increased incomes of our farmers and fisherfolk. Number 2, merge the DA and the DAR bureaucracies without undermining security of tenure, and in order to focus on extension services at the provincial level. Number 3, establish the Department of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources. Our national territory is 4/5 water and 1/5 land. We must address the dysfunctional budgetary appropriations that places more on land, while that is critical, and very little for fisheries and aquatic resources. Number 4, establish demo farms in the Malacañang complex, as well as in selected SUCs nationwide, to showcase best practices in agriculture and fisheries to be jointly managed by the Office of the President, the Department of Agriculture, and the SUCs concerned. Finally, last Sunday, I had a dialogue with rice farmers in San Simon, Pampanga. There I met Tatang Mameng and Tatang Meg. Tatang Mameng is 84 years old and started farming when he was 17. Well, Tatang Meg is 87 years old and started farming when he was 20. They have between them, they have been farming for a total of 134 years. Individually, they have literally shed blood, sweat, and tears for over half a century so that we as a people can have food on our tables. They have fed us for more than 6 decades, respectively. So why are they even still farming? And more significantly, why are they still poor? And to us, I ask this, and what kind of society and people will allow for such a gross injustice to persist unaddressed? It is a society that cries out for genuine reforms and social transformation. And this is why, for over a decade now, we have taken on the cudgels for our farmers and fisher folk, as we have before taken up the cudgels for the marginalized. This too is why I agreed to run as vice president with Vice President Lenny as her vice presidential candidate, to address fundamental and long-running systemic ills that have prevented our nation from becoming the powerhouse it most certainly can become. With your support and the support of the rest of the nation, with our collective will, perseverance, and steely determination, with leadership that we can trust and leadership that has accomplished or has a track record of service, we can and will make this happen. Our children deserve nothing less. Magandang araw sa kanilang lahat, and I welcome the opportunity to answer a number of your questions. Thank you for having me.
Maraming salamat, Senator Kiko. It's indeed good to see you. You're looking well. It's been a while since we actually saw each other in person. And I must admit that even through the screens, your passion when it comes to agriculture really comes through. And that is something unique and very admirable, Senator Kiko. Well, of course, there are a lot of questions in the minds of our guests, as well as from me, of course. And so let's get the ball rolling, so to speak. Senator Kiko, a VP, whether it be in the Philippines and the United States, has always been, rightly or wrongly, considered a spare tire. And in fact, a wisecrack was made by an American, I recall, that the main function of a vice president is to mainly to check on a daily basis the state of the health of his president. And now, one, do you agree? And number two, how will you ensure that if elected as vice president, you will play a pivotal and important role? And lastly, what will be that role?
Well, we have discussed this in general terms with the vice president, and she has publicly said that our experience as in the agriculture sector, will really be important, considering that joblessness and hunger has really exacerbated the situation, the economic situation in the country. The biggest job loss last year was 50%. Job losses was from agriculture. 3.4 million jobs were lost, and 1.7 million of those jobs were in agriculture. So really, we feel that will be our role, how we will be able to use our extensive experience in the national government to address issues plaguing agriculture and food security.
So in essence, you will perhaps, if both of you would win in the coming elections, you would ask for a portfolio. Well, usually the vice presidents in the past, if I recall correctly, end up as Secretary of Foreign Affairs. So you will be asking in particular for the agriculture portfolio. Would that be an accurate statement?
Whatever position that will help in the agriculture sector. We haven't discussed the details, so I wouldn't want to preempt our vice president, our soon to be president.
Fair enough. Do you think that we should already, but this requires an amendment to the Constitution, that it should be a tandem. The president and the vice president should be voted as a tandem. In the United States, that is the case. But in the Philippines, it is not, because our Constitution provides so. And the result of which, if I'm not mistaken, in the past couple of elections, we've had a president belonging to another party, whereas the vice president belonging to the other party. And this, I guess, goes to the fact that we do have, sadly, a weak party system in the country, not really, sadly, not perhaps based so much on party platforms or ideologies for that matter. Now, would you agree to amend the Constitution and now call for a tandem vote?
Well, I think a tandem vote would promote more stability and more continuity. And yes, you're right. It is more a product of the weak party system that really needs political reforms. Political party reforms is critical. We must have a anti-dynasty measure. We must have a anti-turncoatism measure. You don't want to prevent politicians from transferring parties, but it shouldn't, wag naman parang nagpapalit ng damit. And if they should transfer, there should be some consequences, or at least a process of approval from perhaps the Commission on Elections before it can happen. In other words, we have to strengthen the party system. And with respect to charter change, yes, it requires charter change, but whether I will agree to charter change is another thing altogether, because there are provisions of the charter that we need to amend. But my fear is what will be the agenda? If that is the agenda, fine. Then let's have charter change. But if the issue becomes no elections or term extensions or a shift to a parliamentary system, I have my qualms there. But you're right. It would be ideal for the president and vice president to be elected as a tandem.
Well, I'm glad, Senator Kiko, that you mentioned charter change, because that's exactly my next question. And I do agree with you that there are some provisions in the Constitution that perhaps really needs to be amended if we are to be in tune with the times. But my question in particular would be respect to the need for more foreign direct investments in the country. It has been said that one of the stumbling blocks why not much of foreign direct investments come into the country and would go to our neighbors like Vietnam, for example, is there are certain provisions or economic provisions in the constitutions that would stymie an investment coming in. So are you willing to have charter change, but specifically only to certain economic provisions in the Constitution?
I think right now what we should start monitoring is the passage of the amendments to the Public Service Law, which now opens up certain industries to 100% foreign ownership, and also the amendments to the Retail Trade Law, which also now allows bigger participation of foreigners and foreign investments. Before we talk about constitutional change, we have in the Senate undertaken the necessary interventions to amend our laws so that foreign direct investments will be more welcome and there will be greater interest by foreign investors, precisely because we have amended these two laws. So let's have a full implementation of these laws first, and then we'll take it from there. But I must also say that the lessons that we can draw from the administration of President Aquino, you didn't need a charter change to have 6.2% average growth of our GDP. Historically, the last time that happened was in the 70s. You also had 20 billion foreign direct investments from 2010 to 2016, compared to 11 billion from 2001 to 2010. The previous administration, about double, without charter change. Inflation was down to 1.2% in the last 6 months of 2016 without charter change. 5 successive credit rating upgrades from 2013 to 2015 without charter change. So really, let's let these two laws that are now, they are now about to become law, amendments to the Retail Trade Law, and amendments to the Public Service Act, which now makes it possible for greater foreign direct investments in these areas, in retail and in telco and other industries.
Thank you so much, Senator Kiko. Talking about investments and trade, there have been a lot of talk, debate, discussions on the ratification or the move to ratify the RCEP, or the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. And we all know that the main purpose of this partnership is to harmonize the number of or numerous bilateral trade agreements among the different countries. And I would understand that it would comprise about more than 30% of total GDP, of global GDP. But right now, there is while we have signed it, the Senate, if I'm not mistaken, at this stage, at this point, is yet to ratify. There are moves calling to either defer ratification at all or to totally not ratify it. What is your stand on this, Senator
Yeah.
Kiko?
I am against not ratifying it, but the dynamic here is that we only began debating this year. It was sponsored, yes, but the debates only began this year. So, you were hard pressed to look into this more thoroughly. The committee hearings were conducted, yes, but in the Senate, the debates are really on the floor. On the session, and that's why that is a challenge. I support our entry, but I need to thresh out some of the concerns being raised by particularly the agriculture sector. Yes, there are those who are saying that the agriculture sector will be affected adversely, and so we need to hear them out. In fact, I'm going to be interpolating later at 3 o'clock. And I prepared several sets of questions for this. But yes, I agree that we should be part of RCEP. Now the question is, do we rush it now, or do we wait for the next administration and have a go at it within the period that is also allowed under the treaty?
It's very good to hear you talk about the food security, because clearly that is, I totally agree with you, that should be front, left, center of any discussion of any administration. And we all know that agriculture, yes, it's not, but agriculture is close to your heart, and rightly so. You did touch on it, but can you be more specific? How do you intend to improve this sector, and how do you intend to reinvigorate the agricultural sector?
Well, my experience as in the executive department was really crisis management. When I was appointed Food Security Secretary, the NFA was, severely challenged. There was 15% inflation rate of rice inflation. So that was really bad. People were suffering from that. Every time rice prices go up, hunger yan. The cocoa lisap in the Philippine Coconut Authority, the scale insect infestation was raging, Calbar zone. That was 2 million trees were dying because of the infestation of a pest. And then the NIA, National Irrigation Administration, management was putting out paid ads on newspapers attacking rank and file were countering with paid ads attacking management. That was the setting within which I came in. It was really crisis after crisis in these agencies. And so we put things together. I believe my own experience as having been senator for 2 terms and then secretary, we were able to bring synergy among interdepartment synergy. I spoke directly to Secretary Cesar Purisima of Finance, Secretary Greg Domingo of Trade, Secretary R.C. Balisacan of NEDA, and Secretary Babes Singson of Public Works, to look into all the challenges of these 3 issues, the issues that were, and we were able to turn things around. Within 1 year, we dropped rice inflation to 0.8%. We rejected bids from Thailand and Vietnam for the first time in the history of NFA. We said, this is too expensive, we're not going to buy this rice. And every time we rejected it, they brought the prices down. And for those 4 rejections in the NFA, as I was chairman, we saved government 6 billion pesos just on a year. The Philippine Coconut Authority, we mobilized the DILG, the PNP, the University of the Philippines, Los Baños Crop Science Center, mobilized the local governments, and we were able to end the cocoa lisap infestation from 57 hotspots to 1 hotspot. The Food and Agriculture Organization described our efforts to end the pestilence as commendable and praiseworthy. And in the NIA, we appointed a very capable professional engineer who was able to put things together and we had Babe Singson and I in the board working together. The answer here, agriculture, we know all the solutions. We've been talking about solutions since the 1990s. But what we need is strong will and political leadership committed to be able to really mobilize the bureaucracy out of its, the challenge really is how do you get interagencies to work together, because problems are never just limited to one agency or one department. They're always interrelated. And we were able to do that. And I'd like to think that's what we're going to be able to do moving forward. Get the right leaders with the competence, work together, identify the problems, and with passion and zeal and steely determination, solve these problems one after the other. I remember telling the Philippine Coconut Authority, because we were supposed to meet regularly, at least twice a week. And I said, if you're not here, that's fine. I'm going to meet with whoever is here. This is a pest. Hindi ito nag-iisip, sabi ko. Hindi ako papayag na yung hindi nag-iisip na peste, mas magaling kaysa sa tao na nag-iisip. So let's put things together, mobilize whatever we must mobilize and defeat this pestilence. And I'd like to think the same should apply for COVID.
Thank you, Senator Kiko. We'll take a short break and then we'll come back right away. So to our listeners, don't touch that clicker. Stay with us. We'll be back. Welcome back. You're watching Meet the Vice Presidentiables, Economic Reforms in the New Frontier, and we have with us Senator Kiko Pangilinan, who is running for Vice President of the Republic of the Philippines. Thank you so much again, Senator Kiko, for being with us despite your very busy schedule.
Thank you.
Now, would you agree that the policy of importing agricultural products to augment the country's food supply, do you agree with such a policy?
Only as a last resort when supply is constricting. But precisely, why is why is there insufficient supply? And I think in the end, and anyone in business will say, management 101, what is your number one resource? Your manpower, your human resource. And what is your human resource in agriculture? Your farmer. What is his current state? Average age is 55, 56. Average educational attainment is grade 4. Average income is about 6,000 a month, even less for some. That's how we're taking care of our people. And you expect the agriculture sector to progress? No. And that's why we end up importing. I believe you support our farmers and our fisher folk. Their yields will increase. When their yields increase, then you will have enough supply in the market. Do you know that there's a university of, Benguet University study that their vegetables, up to 67% is lost by the time it reaches Manila and the table. Only 33% reaches the table. Can you imagine if it's the other way around? That 67% reach, and that's because of post-harvest facilities. Kulang ang cold storage. And that's why doubling the agriculture budget must precisely address these gaps. That's where we put the money so that we can address the challenge of supply. And when we address the challenges of supply, then we no longer have to import.
I'm glad you mentioned again about the farmers starting being a farmer when they were young, and now they're like in their 80s. Because I've noticed, and this is similar also to mining, it seems that a lot of the children of farmers, or the children of miners for that matter, would not want to follow the footsteps of their father or of their parents. It seems that they would rather do something else, like working in a call center and all that,
Right.
or maybe pursuing another career. Is there a way, pardon me for using this word, but is there a way to make farming sexier, something more attractive, that it will actually encourage young people to go into farming, or as a matter of fact, also to go into mining? So, any suggestions on that?
No, there are templates. Obviously, kinakailangan tumaas ang kita nila. Otherwise, magko-call center na lang ako. Ibebenta ko na lang yung lupa ko dahil what's the point, di ba? So if a new generation of Filipinos no longer want to farm, what will happen to our food security? So this is really a crisis in agriculture that we need to address. And how do you address that? We passed a law, Sagip Saka Act. Sagip Saka Act now mandates that national and local governments can purchase directly without the benefit, with no longer having to do the cumbersome public bidding. Exempted na sa public bidding kung ang gobyerno ibibili direkta sa farmers at fisher folk. Pag nakita nilang mataas ang kita, maganda ang benta, if the lenders, and it's a combination of a lot of things, no? And I'm answering several questions here. You know, how do you make farmers be able to access credit and not the 5-6? You know, if a lesson here is the Jollibee a partnership with onion growers. When the microfinance corporation saw that there was a partnership with Jollibee of these onion growers, they became bankable. Sige, papautangin ka namin kasi ano yan tinutulungan ka ng Jollibee, malaking kumpanya yan. So today, the NGAs, the SWD has relief operations, they need rice. DepEd has regional hospitals everywhere. DILG is provincial jails everywhere. They all need food, but they buy it from the traders and they buy it from middlemen. Why not buy a chunk of that directly sa farmers and fisher folk? And you know what? In Camarines Sur, the multipurpose cooperative of Camarines Sur in 2020, in 2019, their total revenue from sale of agricultural products, kasi hindi pa bumibili yung LGU sa kanila, was 7 million. In 2020, because of the Sagip Saka law, 13 LGUs bought their rice from this Camsur Multipurpose Cooperative. Hindi pa tapos yung taon, 62 million na yung binenta ng Camsur Multipurpose Cooperative. So that's where the Big Brother concept comes in. Government starting to buy from our farmers, they become bankable. Then the microfinance corporations and companies and even banks will say, sige, pautangin ka na namin dahil meron ka ng malaking kliyente, gobyerno. And then you have post-harvest facilities. Pwede na silang umutang to come up with cold storage facilities. pwede rin, and we will amend this law, the Sagip-Saka law, so that even private entities engaged in the business of food, when they donate equipment, when they donate technology, when they donate transport to these farmers and fisherfolk cooperatives for a period of maybe 10 or 15 years, they can deduct it from their corporate income tax. You now push capital into the agriculture sector. And that's how you're going to transform our farmers from subsistence farmers into farm enterprise managers. And that's how we're going to get out of poverty.
Thank you, Mr. Senator. Before I leave the, the topic of agriculture, I have also one question on fishing. Since you touched on that law, and I think it's a very good law, but there's also the agri law, the agri law, which was passed years ago. But there seems to be a provision there where, if I recall correctly, banks are mandated to lend to farmers a certain percentage of their loanable funds.
Yes.
However, there is an escape. You don't have to lend if you buy bonds from the government, or in fact, perhaps you get land bank bonds.
Yes.
Now, is that law still there? Don't you think that that particular provision actually circumvents the very essence of why the law was passed?
Well, I can understand why there is that. That's the, that provision is there, no, in that sense. Na kasi nga hindi bankable yung farmer. That's why I gave you the example of Kamsur Multipurpose Cooperative. 2019, he sold 7 million. 2020, he sold 62 million. You think the banks will not look at him a second time around in 2020 now that he's selling 62 million? You think papansinin siya ng banko kung 7 million lang ang benta niya? So now, now banks will now look at them, take a second look at them, because now they're selling as much as 62 million, and the year wasn't over. Huh? In fact, the quote of the member of the cooperative was, "Yumaman kami dahil sa batas na ito." So yung nangyari dyan sa Kamsur Multipurpose Cooperative, gawin na natin sa buong Pilipinas. And you know what? There is 41 billion pesos worth of agricultural purchases possible in the 2021 budget. I mentioned already all those agencies. Can you imagine if even just half of that, we buy directly sa farmers and fisherfolk? You're going to have a game changer. But there are challenges to it. And that's what, assuming we win, by July 1, we will convene the DILG, the DSWD, the DepEd, the DOH. We're going to ask them, give us that program so that before the end of the year, you're already buying from our farmers and fisherfolk a chunk of your agriculture product requirements. Fish, you know how much the DSWD bought in terms of agricultural products for their supplemental feeding programs last year? 800 million for meat and 1.2 billion for, in other words, 1.2 billion total. But the most purchases were sa mga supermarkets, sa mga trading companies. Halos wala yung mga farmers. So we're going to have to re-engineer that and retool that so that the bias by government, let the middlemen sell to the private sector. Walang problema yun, di ba? And the private sector is 85% of our, 80%, 77% of GDP. So doon na yung mga middlemen. Yung gobyerno, tutukan natin yung ating mga farmers at fishers. Sorry, I'm answering it too long, but
No. Very, very good. These are very good and very comprehensive answers, not just motherhood statements, and which I'm sure the businessmen that are watching really appreciates. Seafood is basically the second staple next to rice for Filipinos. Yes. I understand that the per capita consumption of fish would be roughly something like 40 kilograms per year, or something like 109 grams a day. But there is a depletion as far as our fish stocks is concerned. How will you address that if you become vice president?
It's really managing our coastal, our municipal waters properly. And that will require, and that's the beauty of the Robredo Pangilinan tandem. We really focus. There cannot be long-term sustainable development in any community if the stakeholders are not engaged and are not participating. And that's why municipal waters, when managed effectively, the resilience of the coastal, the aquamarine resource, they really regenerate. And that's why the Ramon Magsaysay awardee, si Kad Dodong, he won that, but he was able to bring together farmers, fisher folk, addressing managing our municipal waters. That's one. Second, we really need to have a Department of Fisheries. 4/5 of our territory is water. We can actually be the aquamarine powerhouse of Asia if we put things together. We have 3 tuna belts. We have a tuna belt in the Pacific. We have a tuna belt in the West Philippine Sea. And we have a tuna belt in the Mindanao Sulu Sea. And yet the number 1 exporter of canned tuna in the world is in Thailand, who does not have a tuna belt. And guess where that tuna comes from?
From us.
So doubling the DA budget, precisely means putting the money in these areas that have continued to be underdeveloped. Now, if the private sector sees government is serious about investing in agriculture, then the private sector will also be inspired to invest. Diba? That's how it works. If private sector sees, yes, the policies are consistent, are clear, and they too are investing, then we too will come in and invest. But if government neglects it, if government steals the funds from the farmers, why will private sector even care?
Now, from food security, let's go into another very important aspect, which is energy security. There is a perceived, or rather, it's not even perceived. It's just a question of when it's going to come. It's not a question of if, but when, of a looming energy crisis.
Yeah.
If you become vice president, how will you address this looming crisis?
Well, the president, soon to be future President VP Lenny, has said that indeed we really have to address the challenges of power generation in the country. We do have commitments in terms of being carbon neutral by 2050. So we do have to look into renewables as the way forward. But it takes time, and so we really have to dovetail and double time our efforts into creating the environment wherein the private sector investments in energy will come in. And so this, I think, is something that must be addressed. Of course, the issue also of Malampaya keeps cropping up, and that is something we have to review. We are concerned about not just energy security, but also food security. That's 551,000 square kilometers of water, and you have rich in all these marine resources. So it's not just power security or energy security; it's also food security. And if we will have to fight for that area, because it will lower our electricity costs, it will lower our fuel costs if done right, and of course it will lower our food costs. So all these are, in other words, well, this is going on to another topic, but yeah, we have to fight for the West Philippine Sea and the arbitral ruling. That's ours, and so much is at stake.
I'll definitely ask you about that in a little while. Talk about energy. Are you open to nuclear energy, to nuclear power?
Well, I'll be honest. It's not.
It's clean.
Yes, it's clean, but is it safe? And we're in a Germany, for example, is continuing to move away from nuclear, and therefore, and they're the biggest economy in Europe. So I have my reservations about going nuclear, especially in a country where there are earthquakes and volcanic eruptions and tsunamis and all that. So, and you remember Sendai. The Fukushima was a tsunami. So really, it's a challenge. It's a challenge.
And I guess I will not ask you anymore, because my next follow-up question would have been, are you open to the commissioning of the Bataan nuclear power plant? So clearly, I know what you answered to that will be. But you have to admit that there is indeed an energy crisis, and even in Europe, they've actually felt it already. And one of the reasons why that is so was because of the policy to phase out fossil fuels quickly overnight and to rely solely on renewable energy, which we know is intermittent. So it is clear, based on the experience of these countries, that relying solely on renewable energy is unrealistic and quite dangerous. So what will be your policy if you are elected into office with respect to that balancing act?
I will share, of course, the position taken by our standard bearer. And Lenny has said that she's looking at hybrid interventions. So a combination of fossil and a combination of renewable. And that's where we're at then.
Okay, we'll take a short break again. And when we come back, I'm going to ask you about the West Philippine Sea. So to our viewers, don't go away. This is the part of the exciting part of the forum. So don't go away. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching the Meet the Vice Presidentiables, Economic Reforms in the New Frontier. And we have with us, of course, Senator Kiko Pangilinan. Thank you again very much, Senator Kiko, for being with us today. I know you'll have an important meeting at 3 o'clock as well. Again, to our viewers, thank you so much for joining us. I did mention before the break that I'm going to ask you about the West Philippine Sea. Well, we all know that based on initial studies, there's a lot of oil and gas in that area. However, because of the issues with China and their 9-dash line, which was struck down by the arbitral ruling, of course, it was very difficult for us to be sending our seismic ships to do whatever is needed to find out exactly what is underneath. So are you in favor for a possible joint development arrangement with China or any country for that matter? Because if this is just underneath the water and not being tapped, then it would be useless. And yet, initial studies have shown that it holds so much even bigger allegedly even bigger than Malampaya. So are you open to a joint venture, joint development?
Yeah, I share the view of our standard bearer. She says that there is an openness to do this, provided that there is a recognition of the arbitral ruling regarding our claim, the disputed, well, no longer disputed because there has been a ruling that this is part of our exclusive economic zone, at least in these areas. So I hope I answered the question. Yes, provided there is a recognition of our victory in the arbitral ruling.
Well, in relation to that, might as well ask you this question as well. If elected, what will you do with respect to our victory in UNCLOS?
Well,
what will you do?
You know, ultimately, we must build multilateral relations, alliances. When the water cannon incident occurred, for example, wherein our army, our armed forces was supplying our soldiers there, the supply ship was confronted with water cannons. And immediately Australia, Japan, and even the US made public statements condemning the water cannon. So we must reach out to them. We must build alliances. And of course, ASEAN. You do have Indonesia and Vietnam who are very adamant about their own positions and their own claims. And there's no war happening because of that. In fact, there are incidents wherein China vessels have been sunk by Indonesia, but precisely there is no war that happens. In the end, we have to stand up for what is ours. The armed forces of the Philippines mandate is to defend our sovereignty and our territory. So we have all the means to be able to assert without going to war our claims and our sovereign, our rights over these territorial and sovereign waters. So we should exert that. We don't want our, we want China to be our friend in terms of trade, economic relations. We want to strengthen that. And we'd like to see, better quality investments here rather than POGO. And that's what we want to look forward to. We should be able to do that. Diplomacy should be the way to go.
Since we're touching already on the topic of international relations and foreign relations, we know we live in a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. In Europe right now, for example, Soviet Union, or rather, former Soviet Union, Russian forces are now amassing along the Ukraine. The tensions between the United States and China, as you can see, they would use the right of innocent passage to cross the alleged 9-dash line. Attempts, we've been hearing of the Chinese leaderships saying that definitely Taiwan is a renegade province, and someday they will just have to get Taiwan back. So there's a lot of things going on, a lot of nationalist movements going on as well. How will you position the Philippines in the global arena, in the global stage?
Again, we need to strengthen allies with common and shared values, democracy, as well as those who may view democracy in a different sense, but we share values of peace, of mutual respect, of common, our common humanity. COVID, for example, it would have been a great opportunity to come together and strengthen our links and our ties with our neighbors. But unfortunately, in the last 5.5 years, we seem to have veered towards a very select type of diplomacy in terms of our, closeness to China. There's nothing wrong with being close to China for as long as it's not at the expense of our own relations, our relations with other countries at the same time, and of course our own interests. So we have to strengthen multilateral partnerships and cooperation. So ASEAN plus Japan, the US, ASEAN with China, the RCEP. So this is, I think, how we can safely, navigate through the VUCA. And that's why we need to be nimble. That's the counter to VUCA. Agile, proactive, nimble, quick-footed. Hindi na pwede yung, how do you call this? That we are very slow to respond, like a dinosaur. Hindi na pwede yun. The world is too fast. Everything is happening too fast. And we must be nimble and quick and responsive and on top of, if not ahead of the game.
Thank you, Senator Kiko. Alam mo, marami talaga tayong katanungan. Nagtareksakan dito sa aking telepono, pati na rin sa aking screen. So, with your indulgence, mga konti tanong pa lang, isa dito, not exactly related to the economy or foreign relations, but I guess it's a question that a lot of people, nasa isipan ng lahat ng nakikinig at nanonood. Ang tanong sa iyo, Senator Kiko, ano daw nangyari sa Liberal Party? Bakit daw yung Liberal Party titular head, why isn't she daw running under the LP banner? Bakit nga daw? Meron bang disconnect between her and the party? Maybe this is an opportunity for you to explain that.
Not at all. Not at all. She has not left the party, but she felt the act of running as independent will open the doors for more to come in and support us. This is an effort to reach out to as many who are interested to help in this effort. And besides, I'm the vice presidential candidate and I'm the president of the party. So there's for us there is no issue in terms of her decision to run as independent. In fact, when they asked me about it, I said go ahead. I think this will be a strong signal to the non-alliance, that they are welcome and other parties are welcome. That's really the long and short of it. And Vice President Lenny has been so ever since. The participatory, inclusive effort. There's a question here about the Robredo People's Councils. Why is the council not so inclusive? Well, let me know which area is this and we will raise it with them, because no one should be excluded. If they're interested and they wish to help, they should be welcome. We need all hands on deck. And all support is welcome. Every vote will count, and every effort is precious, regardless of where they're coming from.
Thank you. Meron pa isang katanungan dito, pero I understand this must have been answered in the past. Pero sinasabi nila, bakit daw nag-iba yung kulay from dilaw naging pink?
Pero una-una, hindi kami yung pumili ng pink. In fact, naka-blue si Vice President Lenny. Ako naman naka-green nung aming announcement. Because on the day of her announcement, the people who supported her started putting all these pink ribbons in her office, in her gate, and we're all in pink. And then that evening, when the announcement was made, social media turned pink, all these buildings and schools. So dapat itanong nila sa tao, bakit nga ba nag-pink yung tao? Kasi kami tinanggap namin, in-embrace namin yung naging desisyon ng tao. Why did we embrace it? Because, it's difficult to ignore. The whole social media was pink, that evening. All the schools turned their lights pink. So, you embrace the people's initiative. And for that matter, there was this issue of tie a yellow ribbon, di ba? Nung panahon ni Marcos at bumalik si Ninoy. So nag-tie ng yellow ribbon. If none of the people tied yellow ribbons, then there wouldn't have been any yellow whatever. But it's the people. There was a call, and then people responded, and that became, and really in the end, this is really when the people start, making their sentiments known and they start speaking up. We have to listen. So yun. And really in the end, we really are, in reality, all colors. Yellow, yes, played a critical role in our country's history in terms of restoring democracy, and that should never be forgotten. But we have new battles to face, and in this case, it happened to be pink. The people themselves chose pink.
Okay, I guess once and for all.
I'm just fortunate that I look good in pink. Sabi nila, medyo bagay daw ako sa pink. Buti na lang.
Thank you so much for your candor. I have another question here. What is your position on mining?
I am for responsible mining. We do have had challenges in the past, and really that's something that we should always be guided by and learn from. But we also cannot not have mining, because it does provide jobs, and it does provide the certain necessary materials for us to be able to progress. But I'm concerned about the free informed consent. That has to be real. That shouldn't be just pro forma, and that the locals must benefit from it directly, and they have to participate and get their sentiments known. I think in the end, anything that has stakeholders' participation is stronger than having to fight them and disregard them and then fight them, and it becomes too and it's sustainable and it's strategic.
I'm afraid we're running out of time, but I will, being the moderator, have the option to ask my own, perhaps last two questions, and taking advantage of your presence, Senator Kiko. We were talking about food security, agriculture, and how important that is. But at the end of the day, there's no agriculture or food security if there's no water.
Yes.
And we all know that water is also a problem. For example, 97% of Metro Manila's water requirements come from only one dam, Angat Dam. Yeah. And if something happens to Angat, can you imagine what will happen in terms of course, the needs of factories, the needs of houses, and the needs, of course, irrigation for the farms. So if elected, what will be your policy with respect to water?
Well, indeed. In fact, that's one of our proposals. Now, we really have to put together all the different water-related concerns of government. You have DPWH handling flood control. You have NIA, National Irrigation Administration. You have the MWSS. You have the LUA. So many various agencies, and they're not talking enough. So you need water for irrigation, you need water for power, you need water for energy, you need, and you don't need water for floods, so you have flood control. And yet these different water management agencies and water-related agencies are not talking. So we must bring them together and address, a more comprehensive policy. Because there are different, for example, flood control is actually also irrigation when you think about it.
Yes.
Why? You bring the floods to a reservoir or to an area, and then harvest it, rainwater harvest facilities, and use it for irrigation or other requirements. I understand the BGC. The reason why it's not flooding is because precisely they put a huge flood water management entity or infrastructure. So hindi nagbabaha dyan. And I understand even in the private sector, they're doing that. The SM Group, I think, in Masinag, for example, has put Masinag in Antipolo, the Marcos Highway there, used to flood a lot, but they funded infrastructure that allowed the management of the flow of water and to hold it. And now there's no more flooding. So DPWH, NIA, LWSS, LUA, all these entities must be placed under one interagency network that will now coordinate how we are to manage our water. And we must also seriously look at rainwater harvesting. We have about 150, 160 billion cubic liters of rainwater annually, and we only harvest maybe 30 billion. The 120 billion cubic liters are not collected, and they all flow everywhere else. And so crazy. We have so much water. We should be able to store, and at times we have no more water. And yeah, so it's really water management.
Well, thank you so much. I'm afraid we ran out of time, Senator Kiko. We could have gone on for another hour. You have been very transparent. You've been very clear. These were not motherhood statements. And we truly appreciate your transparency and your candor in answering all the questions we gave. Maraming salamat po sa iyo, Senator Kiko. And magkita-kita tayo ulit in the future. You take care. Thank you very much.
Maraming salamat. Maybe I have one dad joke. You know,
yeah.
They're asking, what do you have that the other candidates for vice president do not have? And,
what?
Ako lang ang may K. Dalawa pa nga. Di ba? K-I-K-O.
Okay. That's a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, thank you again, Senator Kiko, and to our listeners, maraming salamat. Now, I turn you over to Riza Mantaring. Take it away, Riza.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Kiko Pangilinan, for sharing your plans and programs with us and your views on various issues. You know, we're always asked, are the candidates given the questions in advance? So I'd like to tell people, no, they do not get the questions in advance. So what you hear from them, these sessions will really show you the depth of their knowledge on various issues. Thank you also to Attorney Mike for ably moderating the discussion as always. So at this point, I'd like to tell our listeners, we hope that you found this session relevant in helping you make your decision this coming May. So at this point, I'd like to turn the floor over to Mr. Henry Limbon Leong for the closing remarks.
Thank you, Risa. Thank you. Hello, Senator Kiko. No, thank you so much. Hopefully, you will be promoting our hybrid rice when you become the Secretary of Agriculture. Okay. Also, Honorable Senator Francis Kiko Pangilinan, Phoenix President Michael Guarin, Mike Toledo, my good friend, Riza Mantaring, our sponsors, esteemed guests, business leaders, and viewers, friends in media, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant good afternoon. On behalf of the Federation, Filipino Science Chamber of Commerce and Industry Incorporated, and our co-presenters, Phoenix, Signal, and the Manila Times, I'd like to thank our guest, Vice President candidate, Senator Kiko Pangilinan, for gracing our forum today. Thank you, Mr. Senator, for your very comprehensive talk and for sharing your thoughts to our participants and viewers on our theme, Economic Reforms in the New Frontier. We've worked with Senator Pangilinan back in 2005 to 2007 when he allotted funding for the construction of 200 school buildings nationwide in partnership with our federation. The said program has served thousands of public school students. Maraming salamat, Senator Kiko, sa inyong pagdalo sa aming forum ngayon hapon at sa inyong patatalakay sa inyong plataforma, may ekonomiya, kabilang ng inyong mga prioridad sa food security at agriculture, lalo sa ngayong pandemya. With the 5.6% economic growth that we achieved last year, we are looking forward to more opportunities this year. Our Filipino business needs the support of the government and our leaders to pursue the needed socio-economic reforms and ensure stability to our businesses overcome the pandemic and rise from calamities such as Super Typhoon Odette. We must work together to save and create jobs to boost the Philippine economic recovery. Let's buy Pinoy and support our Filipino farmers. The FFCCCI has over 170 Filipino Chinese chambers and various trade and industries organizations from Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. And we are hopeful for a better year. With the start yesterday of the Chinese Lunar New Year, which is a year of the water tiger. We believe that the Philippines shall become a tiger economy in this year, and we can achieve our economic growth forecast for 2022 from 6.5% to 7.5%. Let's continue to uphold health protocols and vaccines, be resilient and disciplined, and learn to live with COVID-19. Let's unite as a nation in social harmony and to make our country more globally competitive. Once again, thank you, Senator Kiko Pangilinan, for joining us today. Best wishes and good health, Mr. Senator. And finally, we would also like to thank media guests, our sponsors, partners, organizations, participants, and viewers. We hope to see you again in our next forums. Stay safe and healthy. Maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat.
Okay, so stay safe. That's all, folks. Thank you very much to everyone for joining us this afternoon, and see you in our next sessions.
Thank you, Senator Kiko. Thank you very much.
Salamat. Thank